Jordan, and thanks, Micah, for hosting such a great summit. My name is Stephen Murphy. Delighted to be here to host this panel. Quick background on me before I introduce our guests. I previously worked at Founders Forum, where I ran the ClimateTech community in partnership with London Tech Week. So for 2 years, I've been working with founders, multi-stage founders across all climate tech, helping them with connections to investment, to media, to policymakers, hosting the London Tech Week conference. We also have a partnership with Prince Albert's Foundation in Monaco, and we'll mention that a bit briefly a bit later on. I think Lubomila and Joel, if you'd like to join us, and Lubomila, if you want to go first and just tell us a bit about you and your company and what's going on.
Hi, Stephen. Good to see you again. My name is Lubomila. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Plane. We're a software as a service platform for decarbonization and policy alignment. We support businesses like BMW, BNP Paribas, the European Commission, fashion giants like Chloe, and many others to understand how their value chain is creating not always positive impact on the planet, and then how this in a collaborative manner can be navigated towards achieving net zero. The company exists since 5 years, and we've worked with more than 1,000 businesses. I'm super happy to be joining the event, and I look forward to our discussion.
Awesome. Over to you, Joel.
Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I'm Joel. I'm the founder and CEO of CleanHub. And at CleanHub, we are on a mission to prevent 50% of new ocean plastic by 2030. That would be around 7 million tons of plastic every year. And the way how we do that is that we are in the process of making waste management profitable, because the core problem with plastic and with pollution in general is that the waste management process itself usually returns less than it costs. And so we partner with global consumer good brands that help us finance and bring waste management into areas where there currently is none. And we just need to collect a lot more households to proper waste management services to prevent ocean plastic, open burning of waste, all the bad stuff that comes with pollution.
Awesome. And where are you based, Joel? And where are you today?
I'm based in Berlin, and I'm also calling in from Berlin today. Hopefully soon, more time in Asia again.
Awesome. And Lou, I believe you're in London today, but you're based in Berlin as well, right?
Exactly, but there's a lot of traveling involved these days, so I wouldn't stick to one location.
Fair. No, of course. And I think I'll be seeing you at COP27 next week.
Absolutely, yeah. Looking forward to discussions driven by commitment to action.
Great. So let's jump in. I mean, I'm not the expert here by no means, but so this is on the reporting gap, talking all about how we move from words to action. Lou, why don't you give us a quick overview of how you see where we think we are, and we'll go from there.
I think for anyone that follows the sustainability discussion internationally, there's been a lot of evidence that reporting is going to be a core pillar of action that businesses would need to take. There's been a lot of legislation in the EU, in the UK. Some of the legislation has been adopted internationally in places like Singapore, also Australia, and others. And what this has meant for businesses was actually creation of a lot of confusion for many, because all of a sudden they needed to prepare for a lot more reports, a lot more KPIs and data gathering around them that was not necessarily familiar to them. And on another level, it has created a bit of a conundrum between is reporting action? What does it mean if reporting is more utter? Does it really mean immediately that more actually systemic and tangible steps will be taken on behalf of a business to decarbonize their own operations, but also the value chain? All of these elements have been on the minds of a lot of corporates. And I think why this discussion really matters is because there's a lot of evidence that shows that more reporting does not mean more action, actually in some cases contrary. So I think I look forward to us diving deep into what businesses should be spending their time on.
Awesome. We'll come back to the policy and let's stick with what businesses should be doing, because I suspect that businesses tend to maybe be a little bit ahead of the policymakers. Joel, what's your then overview on the situation with the reporting gap?
Yeah, I look at it very much from a waste and from a pollution angle, and I would say we are roughly 10 years behind the entire greenhouse gas discussion. We are now seeing the UN Treaty on plastic pollution coming hopefully into effect in 2024. Some people call that the Paris, or the biggest climate policy since Paris 2015. So a lot of movement is coming. We also see that pollution along the supply chains is playing a big part in the Supply Chain Act, in the European Supply Chain Act. So it is becoming ever more important for companies to look into that as well. But there's a lot of insecurity currently, because also all the big standard setters that are now moving into pollution stop work on accounting principles around waste, because it is such a new topic and nobody really knows how to report on circularity. So there's still a lot of groundwork to be done. And at the same time, I think it's the promising piece is that we see people still acting without all the regulation in place already, because businesses and I think everybody's waking up to the fact that life is best lived on a clean planet, and that we should do our very best to keep our home planet inhabitable.
I'm curious, Joel. I'm in the UK. I know this is a global audience, but from a UK point of view, the UK with Brexit Britain, is the UK aligning with the EU, or where are their standards coming from, or is there a separate set?
The UK actually has their own plastic tax in place, which I think is setting a very, very good incentive, because it's all about the recyclability and non-recyclability of plastics in the way how policy is set up. So basically, if you produce non-recyclable plastic, if you are not using recycled goods in your packaging, you will be fined. And if you adopt circular behavior, you are not fined as a business. And I think this is exactly the right way of setting policy. So I'm very happy to see that come into action, and you can already see what that does on the global markets, because there's a massive increase in demand for recycled products. And this is in the end also what's going to drive all this anti-littering issues, while at the same time really setting the right incentives at the highest possible level.
That's really interesting. So notwithstanding recent events in London, we've had a couple of changes of the Prime Minister, but where you'd say the UK is still ahead of the game?
They're doing good. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Ahead of the game, I'm not sure. But it's a very great approach to policy setting in my eyes.
And Lou, what about Brexit Britain and the UK when it comes to the regulation in your area in the carbon space?
So before jumping into this, I would like to continue on Joe's point, because I think it's a really important one. We are nowhere close to be able to claim that any action is enough, because we're so behind on so many topics that are related to any environmental action. It has been decades that we didn't take any steps. And now the last few years, there's been a lot of fuel in terms of capital, discussions, commitments that has been ignited, but with no action that has led to the results that all these treaties essentially set as a standard or set as a goal. So we're just in the inception of these processes, and it's important to acknowledge that no labels at this point would allow us to really feel satisfied. It really is about starting to see reduction in emissions, starting to see reduction in plastic consumption, and all of these different environmental elements that make the health of our planet so unstable, and therefore lead to financial risk for businesses. In terms of carbon accounting, I can definitely confirm that the last 2 years have been fundamentally shifting the perception of the importance of the topic in the EU and in the UK. There's been a lot of frameworks that have been accepted. The EU taxonomy is one example, but also different directives like the non-financial reporting directive, SFRD as well. Also from next year onwards, we're going to have the CSRD, which is the carbon reporting directive for businesses, which will cover 75% of the European Union economy. And in the UK, for financial institutions or those that manage large assets, there's TCFD. So all of these abbreviations are there to demonstrate that there's a lot of movement going on. And within these frameworks, there's a lot of coverage of carbon emissions. In the US, the SEC announced that they will also follow suit and offer a specific framework for creating benchmarks for businesses and their carbon performance. The whole idea behind all of those is really to standardize the metrics that are being used for discussing emissions, and to allow for more granularity on data collection related to also Scope 3. Historically, the focus always was on Scope 1 and 2, which is facilities and vehicles, and then also fuel, electricity, heating, cooling. And then Scope 3 is where you have suppliers, investments, commute, travel, transportation, logistics, all of these peripheral to maybe the immediate company and its employees' activities, but usually stakeholders that cover 80% in many cases. So that's where I see the most excitement, because this is where tangible action also will be tracked.
Good stuff. And you mentioned the financial risk for business. I suspect the biggest companies in the world, they welcome clear regulation and good regulation. Lou, how do you see this from a business point of view? Are they getting that kind of clear regulation? Is it working?
The response to this is not necessarily very straightforward. If you ask businesses what they want, is definitely more frameworks that they can align to, but also on the other side, not such that overburden them with creating reports that are endless, collecting data on around 500 KPIs, like, for example, the EU taxonomy, which acts as an impediment to them being able to take action. Because at the end of the day, the resources that are delegated to creating these reports could also be there to mitigate the risks. I think where regulation has a big part to play and people appreciate it is where there's clarity around what really good business action is, what preferred kind of alignment to the governmental and pan-governmental commitments is. But if it's just for the sake of collecting data so that we start creating these databases, then it makes maybe a bit less sense.
Yeah, I mean, Joel, from a plastics point of view, it doesn't matter how much regulation there is around reporting. It doesn't necessarily help take plastics out of the ocean and out of landfill. So how is it working for you and your company and your clients, in the packaging sectors and other areas? What's happening?
I think the major and underlying difference is that plastic is a very tangible product, right? It's like basically you can put it on a scale, weigh it in, you can see it, you can feel it, and you can touch it. So in the end, the calculation of your packaging emissions, if you want to call it that way, is more or less your number of sales multiplied by the weight of the packaging. And this is where it already starts to become tricky, because if you require the technical sheets from your packaging company, they say it's like that packaging weighs between 10 to 12 grams. And now if we think at the scale of, I don't know, Nestle, right, with the amount of products that they sell, it's like you would immediately have a very, very big difference in the end result. So I think to some degree in that space, it's also a bit about pragmatism and staying with that. And this might be the startup or the entrepreneur in me speaking, but if we apply a bit more of the 80-20 principle in that space, it already helps as well, because especially in packaging, you will very quickly see what are my big volume drivers, where do I have a lot of packaging, focus on those, and then get better there. And the other thing is where it's fundamentally different, right? It's like we're not talking about a world we want to get to a net zero packaging ecosystem. Or I personally believe that this is very, very unlikely. The goal there is circularity. So people should also measure how circular is my packaging, and then what is the related packaging or carbon footprint of the packaging that I'm using, right? It's like, am I circulating glass? Am I circulating specific types of plastic? What are the melting points? So there's a lot of backroom discussion going on there and a lot of things to be considered. So this is why, or where it gets a bit tricky in plastic. for us personally, what counts is what's the volume of plastic that you're emitting, because in the end, it is very simple. Whatever you put in, you should also take out of the system. And that works in the end very well in circular economy, but with a grain of pragmatism, so that you don't spend 2 years on calculating your plastic footprint before you start getting active. And then all the data is outdated again, right?
And you mentioned, the 80-20 rule. So if you take the 20% top polluters, potentially, they're responsible for maybe 80% of the problem. And you mentioned a brand like Nestle. And what about the big? I mean, I'm thinking packaging. I'm thinking Amazon. Are they? How do you find? I mean, I don't know if they're your clients, but are they sincere? Are they making changes? I mean, I just got Amazon packages delivered this morning, and the amount of cardboard and plastic packaging is just ridiculous. And yes, I should cancel my Amazon, but I haven't.
Yeah, exactly. I think yes and no. I don't think any person in this world gets up in the morning and says, like, what can I do today to make this world a worse place? But complexity rises with scaling operations. Taking the example of Nestle, right? I think they invested 2 billion into finding ways to phase out specific packaging types and phase in more circular packaging types. But they still, I think the packaging is 1.6 million tons of plastic, which is obviously massive, but reducing in such a big scale is obviously difficult. And then at the same time, they are also doing a lot of initiatives in countries with weak waste management infrastructure. They're not directly working with us, but I know that they are taking things quite seriously. The big difference there is really, and this is where I think the UN treaty is coming into very handy, because this is a demand that comes from the industry, is a level playing field. They say it's not possible that we take or it would in theory be possible to take responsibility for all packaging that we have, but if the competitors are not doing it, then this is a disadvantage in the end from a shareholder's perspective also, right? It's like, I'm not speaking on behalf of any of those brands, but this is how I see it. This is why I personally believe that this asking for a level playing ground is incredibly important, because the resources are there. Waste management is not rocket science. This is what I learned over the past few years, but it's mostly a question of cash flow in the end, cash flow and organization.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience of working with some of the biggest companies in the world in all sectors, typically I feel like I'm dealing with very sincere people at very successful companies. They're looking for solutions, but obviously it also takes time we don't have. You've already said we're 10 years behind, but let's call out some of the like best practice, I guess, in both your respective areas. We'll start with you, Lou. Is there one or two companies you'd like to mention that are doing a particularly good job? Feel free to plug a client, or it doesn't have to be either, but let's do one or two companies each. And then if you can name one or two politicians or policymakers, we don't necessarily need to know who they are, just as it helps putting credit where it's deserved. So, Lou.
I definitely would love to start with BMW, which is probably, for many that are not so informed about the automotive industry, unlikely or unusual mention, because the immediate thought is, okay, automotive is polluting so much, or at least like it's kind of perpetuating the problem by producing products that are using fossil fuels. We've been working with them for 2.5 years, and the amount of effort that is being put in transforming the whole company, it's absolutely mind-blowing. They're investing across the board, and it's not only production, but also in fleet management, also in logistics, in every single element of the value chain, effort, but also money and people time in transforming the company, which is the approach that we have seen really works. If it's just a management decision where the focus is on getting a statement to be made on a press release or a label to be claimed about carbon neutrality, that defeats the whole purpose of the process that will kick off after that, because most likely this means that there has not been a management buy-in down the level beyond the CEO. Opposite also applies, where there's maybe employee engagement and there's a push, and but they don't have the buy-in elsewhere. Whereas with them, you see it all across the organization, because they know that they are not going to survive another decade if they're not the leaders in electrification, which is why they're investing billions, as it was announced last week even, in facilities in the US for production of electric vehicles. And also now they have batteries that are made without rare earth metals. So like the waste management problem, which is quite prominent in this industry, is in a way addressed. Another one that is actually, I think, again, quite of a tangible industry physically, and I think Joe has a lot to say about it, given the amount of fashion companies they work with, is Ganni. It's a Scandinavian conglomerate by now in the fashion industry. They produce a lot of cool clothes, and they've been able to really quickly catch up to the well-established brands because they decided to make their sustainability journey open source. So they open up social media accounts and also on their website a designated part where you can learn from all of their mistakes, and you can also learn about all of their products and materials, and actually even about the ingredients within these materials, so that you can just copy it and create your own sustainable textile. They have been absolutely unapologetic about how bad the fashion industry is. So that's why they have absolute emission target reduction goals and so on. But they really don't shy away from the fact that it really takes a lot of effort, and they're willing to put all the money needed to make their company the most sustainable one.
Well, let's get the name again. I didn't catch it.
Ganni, Ganni.
Okay, and that's a consumer-facing brand, or they sell to manufacturers? Yeah. It is consumer.
Yeah,
okay.
They're for the cool kids. If you look at their designs, you see that quite have a special, really authentic brand.
Does it also mean I have to spend £200 on a hoodie?
I can say yes, but even a little bit more, because they definitely are kind of mid-size towards luxury kind of company. But there's
cool, but exclusive. It's fine. I appreciate they're on a good path. I'm definitely going to check them out.
I want to plug in here that there's no way you can produce a T-shirt for £2. So if I put it like that, any company that offers you this probably is somewhere.
I guess I'm interested in somewhere between £2 and £200, but that's okay. Joel, over to you. That's some of the who are the ones you want to shout about in plastics and pollution.
I think specifically Naughty. It's a hair care brand from the UK. And for multiple reasons. They're extremely transparent into how packaging is a challenge. You can very clearly see that they experiment with different kind of materials, and that they also share about the success or also things that might go wrong. Then they had this, or still have it ongoing, that they looked at what are our best-selling products and kind of offered those in bulk, so to reduce overall packaging, right? Because you don't necessarily have to constantly carry your shampoo around with you. And I mean, they partner with us to prevent ocean plastic by supporting projects in India. And I think a detail which makes them exceptional is that they have a packaging technologist working for them, and he's super active on LinkedIn. And since plastic is such a provoking topic, you can see a lot of triggering moments and a lot of emotions on social media, and he really takes the time and is debunking a lot of things live on the comment threads, and explains, it's like, look, this is what's happening if you use this kind of material. This is what the effect are on the long term or on the downstream waste management side, because you can't just plug in, for example, compostable packaging in many cases and then expect that it also decomposes, because you always need specific temperatures around it, right? There's a lot of technicalities behind that. In the first place, packaging is designed to protect the product, and he shines a lot of great light on that. And I think this commitment that you can feel runs through the entire brand is very, very exceptional. Then we had
that name once more. Sorry,
Naughty.
Naughty, like to misbehave,
but with an O, NOUGHTY spelling bee.
Okay, for our next shampoo experience, but I won't buy it on Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. They are great. Then we just had
promoting Amazon. Have they paid you?
I'm saying not to buy it on Amazon. No, I won't buy it on. No, I'll buy direct. So wash my hair.
And we had a very for us it was great to see, because we have a company from Germany, Bilou, and they basically reduced their packaging footprint by more than 2/3 over a year, by really looking into it. And I think these are the great success cases. And in many cases, the conversation with CleanHub, where we ask about the packaging footprint, is also the first point for the brands, where they really start like, oh, okay, how much do we actually have? And a lot of them get on the phone and it's like, we have a lot. And then it's like 1 ton, and others it's like, it's not that much. And then they come back after 2-3 weeks of calculations, like it's 300 tons, where the
So they're
the
the great examples. I think if I asked you to name companies that are failing, you might shy away from that. But what about the hard to abate stuff? What about oil and gas? You know, we always want to push them down, but at the same time, we need to get places. We need construction. You know, how does an industry, and also we've only got a few minutes, but how does an industry like oil and gas even start to address? I know we can't do this in 2 minutes, but what's your take on that, Lou?
I think we shouldn't shy away from speaking about the examples of where action does not work, because this is the only way for businesses to learn on which elements they have to improve on. For this reason, I actually always allow myself to not shy away from giving examples of maybe where action hasn't been successful, examples of carbon neutrality claims only on scope 1 and 2 emissions, with really low quality offsets, or only offsetting as decarbonization agenda, which is actually technically not. When it comes to oil and gas, I actually feel like we are still not able to properly have a discussion on a specific industry level, where we don't immediately put everything into a white and black box. It is quite disheartening to see that if you come from an industry, even the examples that I gave, quite often you're immediately dismissed as a player that is not able to do anything well. I've seen phenomenal examples in the automotive industry, also, as I said, fashion. For oil and gas, I think there was a fantastic report by a Canadian publication last week that showed that oil and gas companies, some of the biggest ones like in Italy and France and so on, they've been able to reduce quite a lot of emissions. The problem in these industries, though, is that there's an inherent sizable amount of emissions. So like, even if you've achieved a lot of reduction, you're still top a performer in a negative way. So your journey is going to be a bit longer. So therefore, the commitment needs to be stricter today, with a lot more tangible steps. So I think we shouldn't feel comfortable to say that if a company fits within a certain industry, they can never be sustainable, because this is a historically unsustainable industry. That is not actually a valid approach, because our economy is built on so many different industries that are not necessarily sustainable, and the majority of industries are not sustainable. So we just need to work towards shaping their views and understanding, as well as strategies on how they can transform. But oil and gas has a long journey to go. So does also fashion and automotive and others. It's just a matter of us like really following how this journey is defined into steps.
Good stuff. Well, I see that our time is up, unfortunately. So one kind of quick question. You know, we've got COP literally in a week. I can't believe it's come up so fast. We've got COP in a week. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about it, Joe?
I'm not going to attend it, but this is not a political statement. It's more that there are other things going on. I think I remain relatively optimistic, but this is because it feels like a lot of the things we have in our own hands, and we can see more and more people working on the big and important topics, and people are becoming more serious. So for me, the very fact that I get in touch with a lot of brands on a daily basis that really truly care gives me hope that things are going to get better. Obviously, it's not an easy task, but pessimism won't help either.
Fair. Lou?
I'm going in there with the acceptance that there will be, again, a lot of pledges made and a lot of commitments, and there will be also a lot of people there with tangible suggestions for how action. I think the main point and the biggest responsibility that we have, and I personally, as someone that is working on the action side of things, is really to push the conversation towards getting people to explicitly say where they face challenges in decarbonizing, face challenges in collaborating with others, and then find ways in which I can be of support to the people that I work with. It is always really important when you go to these kinds of events to know that this is not the event where these decisions are being made. This is the 12 discussions that now are going to be announced. So anything that happens there is an extensive set of press releases. There's a lot of stakeholder engagement meetings, but there's a lot of work that everyone has put over the last 12 months to make this event actually something meaningful. But it's not a one-day wonder where we've been able to achieve all the solutions for climate action to be accepted. So I'm going with a pragmatic mind, open to connect to those that really mean action.
Great. I would suggest to our viewers that they sign up to Lubomila's email through LinkedIn, and then you'll hear what happens. And on that note, I see Maiko's here to kick us off. Maiko, thank you very much for hosting us.
Hi. Thank you so much for running this session, for your time, all the three of us. And I'm just here to share that we're kicking off the next session in just 1 or 2 minutes. So stay tuned. Really excited for another founder to join us, Elliot Coate, the co-founder and CEO of Ecology. Anybody UK-based may know them. We're like a happy customer of theirs with Impact Hustlers. And we're going to talk, and Elliot is really going to talk about new tools for climate hope. Hope is so important in all this, beyond all the technical discussions we're having here. So we'll be offline for a minute, and then we'll be back on stage with Elliot in 1 or 2 minutes. See you then. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye. Thank you.